Hi, everyone. I'm Trist'n from Delta Emerald. I am here to talk about big data in cannabis. Title is The Challenges and the Wins. The title is The Challenge and the Wins. But this presentation basically just goes into what is big data, why does Delta Emerald care, and then how do we use it to drive value for the industry, basically. So just to jump right in, what is big data? So big data by definition typically refers to large and diverse sets of information that typically grow at ever increasing rates. But it's often also defined in terms of its velocity, volume, and variety. So really what that means is volume, how much data is being generated from artifacts out in the wild. These data sets are so large, but extremely useful because they allow companies to answer questions that probably they would not have been able to tackle before. The velocity is how frequent or how quickly this data is both being generated and then piped into the various systems that use it to answer the questions that we need answering to. And then the variety refers to the scope of data that's being generated, whether that be text data, numeric data, audio files, and other formats of those. So this data typically comes in two very wide formats. It can be structured or unstructured. Where structured, typically refers to easily formatted, easily stored, numeric, maybe tabular type data. For example, it could be if you have a brand, sales per month for the last 10 years or something like that. Versus unstructured is more free form, less quantifiable data. And it might be something maybe of the form of transcripts from a podcast about cannabis. So why do we really want big data? Well, it allows us to do a much deeper and a richer analysis of problem statements that ultimately benefit your key stakeholders. But having big data also introduces lots of complexities that we'll get into a bit later. But one of this is the noise. If you have lots of noise in the data, it's kind of hard for you to understand what's truly a signal versus what's just random variation happening. And this thus reduces the usefulness of having big data if you're not sure how to really process it. So as I mentioned before, big data can be defined in terms of its volume and velocity. And this data is so large that traditional processing software just cannot manage. It says big, it should say big. So sorry, big data. But the volumes of data, again, are really useful because it allows your businesses to address very nuanced business problems that you probably would not have been able to tackle without this data. So now that we have context on what big data is, does it exist in cannabis? And the answer is yes, because just by definition, there's so much data being generated at each point of the supply chain, all the way from cultivation to customers actually making purchases, and then even talking about this data. So how do you use that data to ultimately benefit, again, your key stakeholders, which we believe is the customer? So for the data that exists in cannabis currently, this slide just shows an example. It's publicly available information about Colorado. But the slides basically show you maybe three main themes: retail and occupational licenses, which speaks towards transactions data, what customers are buying, how often are they buying it, how many options are there available, meaning stores or workers available to sell cannabis, the number of cultivated plants, so that speaks to both plant and product data, as well as pricing trends and dollar value sales, which again leads to customer behavior. Are customers taking advantage of deflationary methods, or are they trying to purchase like high value, high quality products or something like that? So why do we care, meaning Delta Emerald? Well, we have an overall goal to just empower cannabis companies with impactful information to make the ecosystem better. And we believe that the customer is the ultimate stakeholder or the exogenous variable, meaning that things that the supply chain does ultimately affects the customer, and the customer dictates what they want to purchase, what they want to consume, what they want to have. So the use of this big data to understand customer behavior, we believe that if you funnel that up back through the supply chain, then operators, whoever that term is used loosely, but operators can then change their processes such that they can benefit the customer better. But with big data comes big challenges. And one of the main, or maybe two of the main challenges in big data is making sense of the data that exists and then understanding how these sources of data can be pulled together to generate insights. Two major problems is in data integrity refers to product cataloging and customer tracking. Won't get too deep into product cataloging because everyone on various panels has harped on this a lot. There's so many products being generated out there, and there's no consistency in the products or product tracking, product normalization. So one, assuming that a brand maybe has 10 actual products in real life, it's very possible, just because of how this data is being collected and stored, that these 100 products from a data perspective. And then companies then have to deploy tons of resource and compute power to try to normalize and understand what was this product actually supposed to be. The customer tracking aspect is based on standards and current norms that's happening within cannabis. It's very possible that if especially single stores, but that have single operations, but that have multiple doors, if they're using different point of sale systems, especially, it's quite hard for them to track a single unique customer across these stores. And this makes it hard to do retargeting or actually understanding customer behavior, which is the whole goal of doing this big analysis. So if you can't track your customer, you don't understand what your customer is doing, you can't, tailor your experience more towards that customer because you don't know what that customer is doing. And all of this boils down to there is no single source of truth. Yes, there are multiple data sets that you can use. And one of the problems, as we said, is trying to tie these sources together. But the question we then have to revert to is, does the schema, the data schema, which is just like a table and columns, does that even exist for us to be able to tie these sources together? For example, again, suppose that a single operation, but two different stores using two different point of sale systems. One store might be collecting a user's email address, and another might be collecting user's phone number and not their email address. So even within that operation, you can't necessarily merge those two data sets together because there's no common feature between the data to actually merge the data sets, merge the tables, track these customers. But with all that aside, we do care about big data. We believe that there could be solutions, and we do want to understand what's happening in the space. So we do a lot of analysis on our data on the space to understand what's happening. And one of the tools, one of my favorite tools that we use is a case study approach. And a case study is just an in-depth study on a particular business problem, a thesis, a group, or a set of events. Case studies are extremely useful because they narrow the scope of your analysis, allowing your analyst or the team to focus on a very targeted problem, examine all the other possibilities, and then submit the best solution given the constraints as well as the other available solutions that would have existed. So we've done multiple case studies. One of the most interesting ones is the Cannabis subscriber series that we've published on our Delta Dispatch. But like you see, a few popular subscription-like services here, and some of you might have either one or a combination of them. But could you imagine probably paying, $400 a month, $400 to $1,000 per month, either on a single subscription service like this or even a combination of those? And you would probably say, no, that's too expensive. Why would I ever do that? But from our analysis, we've actually seen that from the subscription-like behavior in cannabis, there are customers who do that. So backing up just a little bit, we've had a thesis, either from anecdotal evidence or just, our understanding of what happens in the space, that relative to Netflix, Amazon, and other subscription-like services, a cannabis subscriber is more valuable both in terms of quantum and frequency of spend. And again, that's just from things we know, things we've heard people saying, but we didn't really have evidence hard evidence to prove this out. So the problem statement was that at Delta Emerald, we do not necessarily have a good understanding of the cannabis customers' purchasing behavior, especially in relation to, do they exhibit any type of loyalty, whether that be brand loyalty, product or product category loyalty, and even store loyalty. And the value of understanding this question is, I mean, if you do understand your customers' behavior, if you do understand whether or not they exhibit brand or product loyalty, as an operator, you can better, again, tailor your experience to fit your customers' needs, whether that be making sure a particular product or even product category or brand is available in your store, such that when your customer profile or your customer segment walks into the store, they can get what they came looking for. So from this study, what we found, just to give you the results, is that customers who exhibit these cannabis subscriber-like behavior, they spend anywhere between $200 to $400 either per month or per transaction across 2 to 7 transactions. Of those customers, all of them returned within at most 60 days, but the majority actually returned, 61%, the majority returned within 3 to 21 days, every 3 to 21 days, to make more purchases of customers who are returning. We found that no, there's not really any brand loyalty as they switched the brands that they were purchasing, roughly 66% of the time. The product categories 33% of the time, but they were most loyal to the store. They only switched stores about 5% of the time, which kind of makes sense. You know, if you're going to, you probably don't switch your grocery store quite often, unless maybe like you're deal hopping or something like that. But we found that these customers are not deal hopping. So, but how did we actually do this? So we analyzed transaction data from purchases within California, both in-store and e-commerce. These transactions occurred, you know, between January 2020 and February 2022. And the data set encompassed 1.8 million unique customers, or customers we believe to be unique customers. And high-level analysis uncovered very familiar trends, that of increasing sales, which are driven by higher units and lower price per unit. When we dug a little bit deeper, we found that of that original customer set, only 66% of customers made only a month. Previously existing customers, meaning let's suppose that we are in February right now, a customer who purchased in January and then purchased again in this month, February, those customers were more likely to make multiple purchases per month, where new customers stuck to making only one. Returning customers spent more than new customers on average, but the main difference in spend was really driven by them making more purchases and not necessarily them purchasing more per transaction. So again, let's say like you were in one transaction, you purchased 5 units. You didn't really purchase 6 units in the next transaction. You just made another transaction of 5 units, right? We found that of these customers as well, the larger group, they switched brands, you know, roughly 39% of the time. So they exhibited a bit more brand loyalty, and they switched product categories 23% of the time. But what we also noticed, although the majority of customers were only making one purchase, this data was highly skewed. And in fact, there were customers making above 10 transactions per month, every month, as much as 14 transactions per month, which is a bit wild. So we decided to do a bit of a clustering analysis to segment this behavior, to understand this behavior at a deeper level. And clustering analysis is basically when you group or segment individuals together, in this case, based on previous purchasing behavior, such that every customer, every individual in a particular group is very similar to the other individuals within that group, but very different or dissimilar from the individuals in another group. So they are all segmented or grouped together based on the previous things that they would have done, which were very similar to one another. When segregating that, we found at least 6 customer clusters that were, quite statistically significant or statistically different. But to interpret this table, where it says customer cluster 1, we found about 1.3 million customers who spent on average $92 per month between making, between 1 to 2 transactions, and typically they would purchase, between, I guess, 3 to 4 different units and between 2 to 3 different brands. Whereas in our high value customers, customer cluster 6, we found about 15,000 customers who on average spent $4,000 on cannabis products. Average transactions about 45, 46 transactions. And yes, it's a bit crazy. Right? Yeah, no, it's crazy.
You come to the dispensary where the
What are you doing? Yeah. But that's a good question. Well, not really a question, but yes, they're probably going to a dispensary or multiple dispensaries, because this is not this is unique number of dispensaries, for example, right? So it's yes, they only switch dispensaries probably 5% of the time, but if you're making 45 transactions, what is 5%, right? So from just our analysis and deeper analysis on this, we believe that those customers who are exhibiting like high subscription-like behavior are those clusters 3, 4, and 5. And as we mentioned before in the previous slide, we are seeing that we're seeing their purchase behavior. So what does this really mean? What value did we take away from this? So we can see that the subscription-like behavior is definitely orders of magnitude more valuable than that of a Netflix subscriber, or even those subscription type models smashed together. We can see that customers are definitely not especially brand loyal. They're probably dispensary or store loyal, but they typically try to optimize for the product category that they are purchasing, sorry. So if they go to the store, they're looking for an edible, maybe they wanted, a particular brand, that brand is not in stock. They're not going to leave the store and just not purchase cannabis anymore. They're just going to purchase the next available brand. And we found that there's definitely a wide range of customer behavior patterns, and a one-size-fits-all approach definitely will not work. Some further analysis we've done, it's not in these slides, but we wanted to understand, well, how does this behavior relate to what you do on 420? Or maybe how does discounts apply? And we found that these customer profiles, the cannabis subscribers, they are more likely to purchase on 420 anyway, because they purchase every day anyway. Mm-hmm. So as a retailer, if now you're just giving everyone, massive discounts, you're probably throwing money away, giving these customers who are more likely to come in anyway, giving them a large discount versus a customer who might have been 50-50, yes, I'm going to buy, no, I'm not going to buy. You're probably more valuable targeting that customer with a discount versus targeting your cannabis subscribers, because long-term, they're going to be there anyway. If you are interested in more analysis like this, or even further information on this specific analysis, I do recommend visiting our Delta Dispatch for more. But that's what I had. So thank you. And any questions?
Question on the transactional data itself, is that coming from various sources? And if it is, is there a lot of time that's taken to normalize the data so that you can kind of create a single source of truth? Or what does that process look like in terms of your data munging?
Yeah, for sure. So, at Delta Emerald, we have, yes, multiple different sources of data, and we do have efforts in place to try to understand if we can map transactions one-to-one across multiple data sets. That both comes from some of our analysis efforts, but also some of the pre-work, I guess you can say, we would do in trying to finalize like what schema do we want, how do we want the data pumped in, and a lot of our providers do a lot of like pre-cleaning for us. So I would say kudos to them for giving us, such great data. Tacos for them. Yeah.
Can you, oh, sorry,
Oh, that's okay. Go
no,
ahead.
no, no, you go.
I was just curious if the data that you analyzed on those customer segments was it in-store purchases or like delivery as well?
It was it's in-store pickup, delivery and e-commerce sales. But yeah, but we did find that even across those segments, there was not, I mean, retail is like in-store was the predominant choice. So there wasn't necessarily like one customer cluster strongly preferred delivery versus another preferred in-store. It was kind of in-store. I think the distribution remained consistent across all the clusters.
Assuming that you have a discrete number of, by discrete, I mean, not wild amount of categories or product categories. Is there any sort of insights that you might be able to share as it relates to how the clustering problem might change for different product categories, right? So you might have you might have any given cluster span multiple product categories, but if you drill into a particular product category, like how is the clustering problem different from the aggregate?
Good question. So I think what we did look at this. What we found was across all so in general, we found that typically cannabis consumers, whether they be subscribers or not, tended to stick to one product category across their entire life as a consumer. Those who, if we think 1 to 6, like higher value customers, as you got into the category of a higher value customer, you did start exploring a bit more with your different product categories, but you always, at least from the data that we found, you always kind of reverted back to that original product category that you started with. There was not strong relationship between clusters and product categories, meaning customer cluster 1 was not predominantly flower, for example, versus cluster 2 strongly preferred edibles. Like there was a mix in between, but what was consistent was that you tended to always revert back to your original, even if you did explore other product categories at one point.
So I guess I know that your organization isn't customer facing, but you are deriving a lot of like analytics for customers. Like, do you see that as a future venture where like you can do like analytics as a product for customer facing organizations?
I can tell you.
Good question.
I was gonna say, I don't know.
I don't know. I will say we do provide analytics for our portfolio companies. We try our best to share all our insights with them and, at times even give them recommendations based on what we are seeing, especially if it's like a brand or something. Try to give them recommendations based on what we are seeing their customer profile is like and how they can use that customer profile to maybe increase sales or something. We are also trying very hard now to share information via our Delta Dispatch. So I'd recommend if you are interested checking that out too. But as for further sharing, I'm not sure what's on our roadmap.
My understanding from talking to operators is that there's a lot of push to try to get the consumer to buy as much during a single transaction, meaning consumer walks in the door, let me upsell the shit out of this customer like ASAP. And I wonder from your analysis, if you have seen that maybe that's counterproductive, maybe it is more profitable, maybe on a monthly or quarterly basis for customers to have smaller transaction values. And then on the aggregate, like what have you done anything on that?
I mean, we've touched on it a little bit. I know that's actually one of the theses that we have and something that we have in our backlog to look at more deeply. But just based on the thesis that we have, I think we think that average transaction value is definitely being skewed and inflated because we do have these customers who come in extraordinarily large, like $400 baskets. And that's skewing, the reporting metrics because let's assume that one day for some odd reason, your $400 basket value customer does not come in, right? As a retailer, I might start to panic because then I would see my average transaction value for that day drop. And maybe to me, that's like, oh, what happened? But if you look at it a bit deeper, you probably, in very wild cases, you probably only had one customer who did not come in, but every other customer in your customer base probably came in and made a very small purchase on that day. So yes, we do think that it's probably more valuable to, have smaller basket values over a long period of time, but it's not supported by data as yet. So I don't know. That's just kind of my thought. Probably have time for one more question if there is any. If
I just
not,
did the math and that $5,000, it's like that person smoking like a half ounce a day and average price per gram, like five.
It could be sharing.
it could be shared. They have lots of friends.
A non-trivial amount.
Yeah.
11,000 or 2 million is like, it's almost a percent. So it's like, or it's in fact almost a 10th of a percent. There's some people that are smoking a half ounce a day.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Oh, the runner, yeah.
it may,
Yeah.
it may should be.
Maybe, yeah.
Like our average price at our retailer in Michigan was like $100+ but it was because we would have people come and buy like $3,000 a week.
That makes sense.
Wow.
But this person was making 45 transactions a month, which means they're growing.
On average.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I've seen some weirdness in our data as well, and especially early on and depending on the dispensaries. Some dispensaries, and you'll see this that sort of gray market, but you see them having thousands of dollars in cart size.
Yeah.
The same person, similar personnel over and over again. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
What are you doing?
Yeah, because that could be what it is.
In Michigan, they don't even enforce it anymore, and people will. They used to like hit multiple stores, but now they just leave the store and come back 10 minutes
It
later.
just could be what's.
Yeah.
Another implication, and I think Ian spoke to this about the lines out the retailer being an aberration, but also thinking about the gray market stuff. You have these customers that are blowing $4,000 a month. And then you have another state go green, right? Another state that legalizes, all of a sudden the sales are gonna drop. Right, for the retailers, like you've
Right.
historically seen those high, because those customers that are blowing $4,000 a month are no longer, because that new market has opened up.
Yeah.
And that's something we've seen across California,
Yeah.
Illinois.
People talk about Colorado, like weed is decreasing, or like the demand for weed is decreasing, it's just going to, people from New Mexico can finally buy recreational. weed.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And I bet there's less tourism too, because more safe for the locals.
Yeah, I mean,
Mom.
even Michigan legalizing in Colorado because everybody from Minnesota used to drive to Denver for weed. And they